I'm Jim Collison, live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 3, recorded on October 12th, 2017. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths themes one at a time, and today's theme is input. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during this webcast, we do have a live chat room available for you right below the main video window. Just look down there on the video window. Choose login, bottom left-hand corner. Choose that. Choose the guest account. Take out the guest's name and number, and just put your name in there so we know who you are. Then click submit, and you'll be in our chat room. I mentioned there's a bunch out there watching the video, and a few more have joined us in the chat room. We'd love to have you in there as well. If you're listening to the recorded version and have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, you can send us an email. Contact us coaching@gallup.com, and actually that email address is great for any of your questions. We've got folks watching it all the time. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com for all your CliftonStrengths coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video and downloadable audio, which we just call podcasting. That's what we call podcasting. You can get that available on both Android and iPhone apps. All the links and everything you need to know to get these podcasts are available for you on our coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. Maika Leibbrandt is our host today. She works as a workplace consultant here at Gallup. She's off-site in an undisclosed location today. Maika, great to see you. Welcome to another Theme Thursday.
Hey, friends. Thanks for being here. Great to see you.
Maika, I mentioned the blog a little bit, and I'll just before we get started, because people with input would like to know, we're setting new records for views on the blog. I know you do a lot of work with me on that blog, but I was looking at it yesterday, and our monthly average hit 58,000 of views in a month. That's fantastic. I didn't think 60 was going to be reachable this year, but we seem pretty close. Congratulations.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. You know what I love about this? So I'm teaching an accelerated strengths coaching course right now. And on day 4 is where we really get to shift gears from talking about teaching individuals to coaching managers. And Jim, evidence of your great manager talent, the fact that you measure things. We just had a great conversation this morning about how great managers are performance oriented, and how part of that is knowing what to measure and having goals and being able to track your progress toward that. So I'm thrilled that you pay attention to these sorts of things. Our dream is 60, 58 is pretty darn close.
Yeah, we are getting close. In our production webcast meeting yesterday, I was meeting with the team, and we just happened, every meeting we pop over to the stats just to kind of take a look, see where things are going. And I hadn't looked at the stats in a couple of days, and boom, 58 was there. And I'm like, guys, we are super, like it shocked everybody, right? And we're like, we are super close to 60. And so for those of you who listen to us regularly, and for those of you listening new, our blog has tons of information that's available for you. All on the coaches blog. You should bookmark it. Coaching.gallup.com is where it's at. Lots of resources, including all the links to this program and all the companion guides and all the links. Everything's there. They should go out there and get that done. Maika, let's not waste. That's enough for the input, right? All of a sudden, stop the video. I got to go click on these
I got to take it all down. Okay, before you go on, though, if you want to get in on that big 58,000 person crowd and contribute to that blog, I know Jim always talks about this at the end, but in case you don't listen to him, if you want to contribute a blog, send your submission, about 400 to 600 words, anything that helps folks understand more about coaching or more about CliftonStrengths. To where, Jim? Where should they send it?
Yeah, they send that to coaching@gallup.com, and then put guest blogger in the subject line so we can get that routed to Maika. So
phenomenal. Now let's talk about input.
Let's do it.
Input is one of my favorite themes. It's a fantastic strategic thinking theme. And today we've got a phenomenal manager, a leader, who's going to be able to talk about what this looks like in leaders. If you've downloaded the companion guide, you'll want to follow along. If you haven't, you want to do that right now. So you can press pause, even though this is a live podcast, press pause and go download that companion guide. The first thing you're going to understand is that long definition of input. Just a few of the words that I love in that definition: inquisitive, a collector. You might collect a lot of different things. Now, you might be collecting words, facts, books, quotations, statistics, data. Often when I coach leaders, I'll ask them if they even collect people, because input is the joy of the absorption. Collect tangible objects. My mom's an artist, and her specific medium of choice is collage, multimedia collage. She leads with input as well as ideation and intellection, and she's always collecting something for the ideas that someday this could have an artistic quality to it. I could use it someday. There's that element of utility to input that helps us really define what it is. It's not just take it all in. It's not necessarily hoarding, but it is you're collecting things really with the motivation that that could lead you to a discovery someday, or that the act of collecting, the act of absorbing information helps you sort through decisions in your mind. It's a complex theme. It's I think an openness to complexity and an openness to variety. If you read, it's probably not necessarily just to refine your own theories, but to open your own mind into thinking about theories that you might be interested in. And I think that helps us really understand a lot of the openness that input brings to the table. In a moment, we'll talk about what it looks like in a leader. And I think that's one of the pieces, is because input can never really be full. In input, maybe there's something to that there. Is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? Somebody with input will find a way. If the glass was of information, the glass would just never be full. And the positivity slant on that would be there's always more that you can take in. I work with a lot of folks who have high input, and I find that if I've ever got a question, I tend to go to them first. I think about them almost as my walking encyclopedia of stored knowledge, stored stories, stored understanding. Just to really define input, to round that out, I find a few more sort of helpful phrases in this definition. With all the possible uses for what you collect sort of swimming around in your mind, you probably don't feel comfortable discarding information or throwing it away. So you keep acquiring, you keep compiling, you keep filing, maybe even filing things away, because it's interesting, because it's how you stay fresh, relevant, aware, and really present. There is always that whisper of potential utility, I think, in the back of a leader's mind with high input. It's perhaps someday something that you come across is going to prove valuable either for you or for someone else. So input, just to define it, is the ability just to take in and to absorb and collect information. Look like in a leader, I think about really how this could be great for a leader. If as an individual, input means that you gather information that might have use. I think as a leader, it's your role to target that a little bit more. I think a leader with input might say something like, I collect and absorb to inform the performance, open-mindedness to leadership because of that infinite potential to locate sources, to come up with angles that haven't been thought of before, to collect ideas or encourage through information, and to think about more stories. I love input's ability to never be satiated. And I think that creates a lot of possibility for people, a lot of opportunities to come up with different ways that you can think about solving a problem. Very often we talk in our courses sometimes here at Gallup about David Maister's formula for building trust. And we talk about it being credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by divided by self-orientation. So if it's not about you, you're gonna be able to, or if you're oriented toward others, you'll be able to create trust a lot more quickly. But I want to take us to the top of that equation, thinking about credibility plus reliability plus intimacy, and how all three of those really do to being somebody who collects information. I think it makes you more credible when you can say, I didn't just come up with this in my gut, but I read an article, or I cited a journal, or I learned this from somebody. That credibility piece. I also think about when I've partnered with folks with high input, and how reliability really credits itself to that piece. Thinking about, I can always count on Mike, for example, for having some information so that I'm never walking in cold. And you'll get to meet Mike here in a second, but think about what that does in a leadership place where others are looking to you for direction, for creating an environment, and they know that they can rely upon your thought process to be not only yours, but to have some sort of nugget that's going to start. So you're never really starting from ground zero. The intimacy part of that equation could come from personalizing the information that you're collecting, learning the stories of other people. Want to encourage folks to think about it having that desire for utility. Now, how something's going to be used, or where it's going to be used, or the certainty that it will be used, it's okay for that typically to remain a mystery. I think that probably is one of the things that differentiates input from learner, is it's not gathering necessarily for immediate use, but it is a real love and a real, I think, desire to absorb with a what if in mind. If you're a leader with input, you might consider about just filing or sorting your current collection into categories that solve current problems. So really investing in that input with the mentality of relevance. Feed your input by hunting and gathering information that is relative to the challenge that's right in front of you, or relative to the challenge that the individuals on your team or your organization may be facing. What you're doing then is you're taking this natural talent and you're aiming it in a way that it can truly perform as a strength, really thinking about being intentional with that input. Leaders might think about building their input is finding and returning to their best go-to sources of input. In many ways, raw input, and I don't mean raw with a negative slant, raw can just be, give it all to me. I'm not going to discern where it comes from. Any information is great information. I think as you learn and as you find what resonates with others, think about where you're getting your best information, where you're getting information that motivates people, where you're getting information that inspires people, or that makes somebody truly learn and clarify something. And then that would even just be answering the question, what are your favorite blogs? What are your favorite professional magazines? Who are your favorite storytellers? How are you capturing time that others might consider to be downtime? Jim, maybe that's in a car, on a plane, on a train. How are you using that? In a way that that you know that spending time in that sort of gathering and absorbing phase is actually you spending time doing work. If you're somebody with high input and it feels like you're the only person who needs to spend some time really thinking and gathering before you take action, that can feel like a lonely place to be. The work you do, researching, gathering, thinking and musing and finding information really will help you focus your energy. That will help you create clarity. That act of finding the information is you doing work. I also think honing that talent by experimenting with the best way that you can recall information. How is it that you offer what you know in a way that obviously communicates support to others? As a leader, I think you have a different responsibility than an individual contributor, and that is to step up to the plate and understand that you create an environment that others don't, just by the very nature of your position. So how can you create an obvious link between what you're collecting and how that is affecting the environment of the people around you? The last thing I want to dive into on the front page of that companion guide are the 4 needs of followers. So we talk about stability, trust, compassion, and hope. And I'll ask Mike about this as soon as I give sort of my take on it. But as I was thinking about input last night, I was just thinking, what could a leader do on purpose to grow that talent into a place where it translates into these 4 needs? First, I'd like to talk about compassion. A leader with input can build compassion by gathering stories of people, not just by gathering information, but by being intentional about considering the stories of the people on your team and that could be a really quick way to build relationships and to communicate love. Knowledge nuggets communicate that you care. Share them on purpose. It might mean, hey, I read this really interesting book that I think will resonate with you. So here it is. Or hey, I came across some information that is relevant to what your current challenge is. Or did you know that I have this, I learned a unique statistic that you could use the next time that you teach this, if you're somebody who's leading teachers. A leader with input can build stability by not just collecting, but collecting information that your team will benefit from. Create a sense of focus, create a sense of support. We know that first item on our engagement survey, understanding what it is I need to do every day, is shockingly difficult for folks to strongly agree with. About half of our database cannot strongly agree with, at work, I understand what's expected of me. And I think a lot of that leads to instability. Somebody with input can help make that better by exploring topics that feel relevant and that re-emphasize what the expectations are. With input could build trust by validating your sources, by being able to know that you're not just going to bring any information, but that you're going to bring information that is credible. And you might even want to be able to talk about that, not just here's something I know, but here's why I know it to be true. I also think you can build trust by thinking about being known for expertise in a certain subject area and allowing yourself to explore and enjoy really going deep in one area. Let's talk about hope, that idea that input can build hope. I think input can build hope through a leader by sharing openings through information when others seem stuck. It brings me back to that beautiful open-mindedness of input. What do you have access to that can help people think beyond their current situation? You probably can use information in a way when sometimes people feel stuck and we go into that survival mode of just do what's right in front of me. I think input can open our brain to other possibilities through sharing other ideas and other information. Thanks for sticking with me through that overture about input. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce one of my very favorite leaders and a real poster child for the theme of input. Mike McDonald is here with us today. Mike, thanks for joining.
Love being here. Big fans of you guys. You know that. Seriously.
Thanks. In fact, talk about high input. Mike and I got to have, Mike also has ideation, and we got to have some good thinking moments together last week as we were preparing, and it became very obvious that not only, Mike, are you an avid listener and a watcher, but that you use and collect this information.
That's correct. That's correct. That's why I was keep going, please, Micah. Why are you stopping? I'm writing things down. I am in the zone right now. I'm going to be a little disappointed now if you stop right here. So yes.
Well, let's follow that train. Mike, in a moment, I want you to just tell us more about who you are, but what did I say that really resonated? As somebody with high input, what really stuck with you?
The thing that I was thinking about this as kind of a thread of leadership, right? And you positioned it well with your description of input, where sometimes I think that there's this singular mindset about input that it's defensive in the sense that it's one-sided, that it's bringing information in that it just happens to come across and it just consumes everything in its wake. And I think as leaders, when we position it well, we take it on the offense. And so it's to your point, it's a little bit of it's that intentionality about not just, yeah, I could consume everything, or maybe that's a selfish recreational desire or pleasure, but what's the point? Where's the boundary of accountability to what it is that I'm taking in? And so what I was actually writing down when you were speaking is, I think it's that accountability for our input to have a couple points in mind. So essentially, what can we build with the information we're collecting? So to me, the image of like these Lego snap-on pieces, that if I read this here, can I connect it to this that I've also acquired information over here? And then maybe all of a sudden I could start building and combining and synthesizing these bits of information into pictures that tell a story, or to an engine or something that has a real value. And then I find the reception to something, because of the increased utility, all of a sudden is infinitely greater and more enhanced. So to me, I was coming back to my accountability. I wrote down, what can I build with the information that I take in, and who am I building up? So when I think about the people on my team and I keep them in mind, there's a unique, right, profile for each one of them. Some of them prefer different kinds of information, and not just different kinds of information, but they have a preferential delivery. So some folks are perfectly fine if I forward on an article to them via email. Some would delete that as fast as they hit their inbox, and they would much prefer that we have a conversation about it. And so I just have to be mindful about not just the content, but also the delivery in a way that's unique and special to that person. So and then that brings us back to just the art of asking questions, which is a beautiful input expression. So, yeah.
So I like that both-sided piece when you're trying to be intentional about how you share information with people, not just what, but how. How do you figure that out? Do you just ask them, what kind of information can I share with you, and what do you respond to?
Yeah. So I feel like this happens with every one of these calls, like the combination that really leverages my input, I think uniquely for me, is so I have individualization as number 7. And so for me, my team, I was thinking about this metaphor earlier. They almost represent, in a good way, not a transactional or boxed in way, but I almost think about people as baseball cards or as playing cards. So I love, so for Maika, what's Maika's unique stats, her preference, her style, her strengths, and I love having Maika's picture on one side of the card, but then on the back, it's everything that represents who Maika is through the content that she creates and the content that makes her a great human being. And then I set that aside and I have that Maika card, and then that helps guide and shape my mindfulness about when I'm screening through all this information. Oh yeah, that would be something that Maika would like. Oh yeah, this would be something that Maika could use. But the only way I know how to get to the assembly of that baseball card is for Maika and Mike to have conversations where Mike is incredibly and insatiably curious and interested in just about who Maika is. No other agenda. I just want to know who you are and just draw all of who you are in the form of content. And that can be emotion too. So I like all of those indicators as key points of information that we can operate from as well.
That's great. So Mike, can you tell us just a little bit about what you do and how you have those conversations with the folks on your team?
So I can. So I have partly through the intelligence that we have from just all of our research, and then partly, just to be honest, from trial and error, I have discovered that the default around human beings actually getting together and talking about things is amazing. And so I have achiever in my top 5. I have focus in my top 5. I have a lot of strengths that hold my thoughts accountable to being translated to action. And so I simply just have default conversations. I'm a big believer in our research around performance development and the conversations of what they're intended to produce. So I just know if I have the right conversation with the right frequency, usually the relationship will be produced out of that. But I will tee it up with a lot of times this might be a little selfish on my part if I had a little confessional moment here, but I always ask people, like, so what are you learning? What do you know? What's the biggest thing that you've learned in the past month or from this most recent class? So I do have learner in my top 5, but part of that invitation is I want to know what information was generated that I would love to have. And there's a value statement in that as well, because I think it honors that person, that the expectation I'm creating is that something special happened. There was a unique form of content that planet Earth has never seen before that happened in that moment with that person, that course, or that consulting. And I would like to know, and I would like to be part of that exchange.
I think it's interesting. I would almost hope that every leader hears there's nothing wrong with finding the most fun way for you to lead people. Mm-hmm. Your benefit from wanting to know what people are learning, even though you feel like it might sound selfish. Gosh, that's probably the most ease, excellence, and enjoyment pathway for you to really enjoy connecting with your team.
Right. And I think it brings there's if it's done well, it does bring out an emotional rise. And so when people start talking about things that are content-wise, their hot buttons, their passions, their pursuits that represent who they are, not only is it informative and functional and have a value and a purpose to it, but to your point, Maika, it should be fun, right? If it's their favorite thing and we align that conversation, the exchange of that is at least as much of the part of the relationship aspect of input as anything else. Not just moving information from one person transactionally to another, but how did we feel in that exchange? And that's a really exciting space to feel when we do input well and when we do it right.
Yeah. How does input help you support people through change? I feel like, of course, change is the only constant, right? But if you think about maybe tough times or times when your team has really had to deal with something maybe they weren't prepared for, what role does input play?
Right. So I I don't know if this is true for everyone. I feel like it could be with everyone who has input. I have futuristic at number 8. So I really feel my input positioned upstream metaphorically. And so it's constantly out on the forefront or on the cutting edge of what's the world telling us? What are the common search terms that are popping up? Like you hear grit, all of a sudden now. Mindfulness used to be another one here that's come up recently. And so it's paying attention to words like that are early indicators that of signs or signals of themes or trends that we ought to be paying attention to, and then filtering through and validating, are they really something we should be paying attention to, or are they false alarms? Are they just purely shiny objects that, while they looked kind of cool for a while, didn't have any lasting value? But that position upstream and being futuristic with that really helps us not find ourselves in a reactive stance. So if we have the right information in our possession and it's early enough, the informed decision-making capability that we need to make the right decisions, to handle change, and maybe not just react to change, but actually create change that has a meaningfulness or a value to it, it repositions us really well. But reacting to a lack of information, I have found, is incredibly compromised and exposed. And so if anything, with input, there's an overcorrection to make sure we'll never get caught by surprise by having the lack thereof, and constantly in a position of strength to manage change and maybe, dare I say, even invite or create change purposefully, knowing that it's necessary.
It sounds like there's a real proactive part of input. You sound hyper aware of what's going on. Even the fact that you can tell me that mindfulness maybe used to be really big. Here I'm thinking, oh yeah, it's big because I learned it was big 6 months ago. So it just stays big. But I like that currency, that or maybe it's currentness, that real presence that input brings, of being really on the pulse of what's floating around you.
Well, and I think the and you mentioned it earlier too, that there is an excitement or a thrill about having input and being the person who was the first to come across an article and introduce it to a group where there's this euphoric wow factor, where it's like collectively everybody says, yes, this really matters. Because I think we see it in so much of the definition. I don't know if there's a higher form of compliment than being useful, and so, for a person with input. And so how far upstream do I need to be of maximum utility or to be most useful to my team? I don't want my team ever having a space where they even have a request, where they're even asking for information. I want to make sure that it's being fed to them, hopefully not at a point of overwhelming, but at a point where the cadence of it and the delivery and the amount is perfectly in sync, so they never have to break stride in their performance. So right as soon as they're getting to a point where they need something else to advance the work we're doing with a client or a course, bang, it's right there, ready for them, gift wrapped exactly with the timing and the amount and the point of relevance that they would need to be at excellence.
It sounds so. Chris in the chat room says, as a leader, how does Mike move from acquisition to action? And it sounds like you're dancing that pretty gracefully, not just being able to absorb all the time, but to gift wrap it and hand it to your people. How would you react to that question?
Well, I really do let, again, I think the individualization in that exchange, I've learned, as all the coaches in this, in your audience know full well, I used to think that input was, had its highest value in being able to provide answers, and have learned it's incredibly valuable and more valuable by its ability to ask questions, and the repositioning of that to be able to connect with people. And so, quite frankly, I allow the folks on my team to have open invitation to guide me. Maika, you tell me what information is useful to you, what's important to you, how much do you like, what's the frequency you like it with, are there certain topics that you struggle with, or those that you naturally thrive or are energized by? And it goes on to that baseball card kind of notation or mentality, where I feel like I have a very good profile of what information consumption looks like. And so I try not to get too preferential in terms of what I would like and too prescriptive in terms of what does it for me, and to really make sure I'm acknowledging the individual style and preference of the folks on my team. So, it sounds like a simple default, but I hold myself accountable. I have to have the right conversations. I need to be asking those questions. And I do enjoy the feedback. Was this information helpful? I think it's interesting in our emotional rise through input, we're never more wildly excited than when somebody says, oh, this is the perfect information I needed right now. You just set me up for success. But then on the other end of the spectrum, I've never felt more frustrated, inept, or useless than when somebody needed that information and I didn't have it. And they are such extreme differences. And I don't know that I ever really get to operate in a middle ground with either one. Either it's a home run, or I've struck out and I've let that person down.
Mike, you've been a really good partner to me in that area, as we are office mates, or very close. I walk by your office all the time and make faces at you through that window. That's right behind you. It's a ton of fun. But you've been really good for me, even in this series, as you have begun to listen. You now listen to them as we put them out. And I love the little, the little things that you dig out and then you share back with me, those things of where because I'm doing multiple things and not listening, and I try to go back in my car and listen to these later. I don't always get that done, but I really try. But you've got those pieces, and then you're able to kind of surface those significant ones for me, knowing, I think you kind of sense that. And so, hey, how about this? And you talk about it, right? And it reconnects me to that conversation. And so I think we have some really good sessions together. And that's the value to me. Input's fairly low. I collect things from a woo standpoint because I collect trivia, but that's from a woo standpoint because I want to impress other people. Like I want to use that as a weapon against other people, right? To convince them. So thank you. From a leadership standpoint, I think you really bring a lot of value to me in what we're doing here with Call to Coach and Theme Thursday, because you're using that input to lead me. Even though I'm here, I think sometimes you sense like, hey, he just needs to hear those things. And that's where input, I think, and recognition can be used well together. I'm sometimes moving so fast that I don't get those recognition moments. But you have been really, really good at pointing those things out at times and saying, hey, you ought to, or you should think about. I don't think if you said you ought to. Yeah. I think you always say to me, you should think about. And I'm not sure we've put together recognition and input. Like how we know from our Q12 assessment that recognition is very, very important part of leadership and what we do. And we do sometimes tie that back to includer, or we sometimes tie that back to relator. But I think input can have a powerful impact on making sure you're collecting all the things that could be seen as recognition and that going forward. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because you're great at this. Yeah, no, I love that. It's honestly one of my favorite expressions of input. And so Jim and Mike, I don't want to weird you out here, but I know stuff about you guys. I pick up on the cues, and the clues are the things that you say. And I love it. I just enjoy you, and you don't even know you don't even know what you're saying so Jim, when you talk about the Bearcats and where your daughter goes to college and the school colors that you're wearing, I'm automatically cataloging that in my mind. That you mentioned that. So by my interpretation, there's something meaningful about that. And I'm going to store pile that away. Maika, when you talk about your hometown and our shared area code that we have, right? And I'm Rolodexing that, and I'm like, oh, Mike is from there. And that gives me a profile. But what I love, Jim, is you translate that to recognition. Like, I love being able to recognize people where in the midst of that recognition, you bring out those little factoids about that person that really puts this finished, it's not just unique, but it's unique and then some. It's me referencing Maika's area code while we're recognizing her for record-setting blog readership in a month, or me going back and Jim, highlighting just the amazing work that you do for 1,000 different audiences, and yet you're a tremendous father who has a mindfulness about and an involvement that doesn't compromise for who you are with your daughter, and it's represented by Go Bearcats, and you're wearing the school colors today here at work. So so whenever there's recognition involved, if I can draw from that source of insight that's provided from that input profile of who I put together around people, it's a blast, because I think we all like to be known, right? And not just known at the superficial, obvious levels, or just for the performance reasons of what we can get done, but for really who
are we in the most granular, unique ways that makes us that individual, that one person on planet Earth that's only going to exist as us. So the delivery of that through recognition is a blast.
Yeah, Mike, that recognition index on our Q12 gets battered. It is the one. We were talking about this, you and I, in pre-show. It is those one that's in an organization is really, really hard to bring. I think collectively in humanity, we're not great at recognizing one another. Mm-hmm. And so it always gets battered. And as a leader, as a manager, I think it's a key input to having your team function well together. And so I've never, before this conversation, really thought of input as being the superpower for recognition, but it really is. Mm-hmm. You surprised me, a couple weeks back, you and Jessica. I'm a big craft beer fan, and so you got me a big growler from a local brewery here in town. That was a big deal for me. Like that was one of those moments. It's like, wow, he remembered, right? Mm-hmm. And it was your input as we were talking. I think you and I were having a craft beer conversation at one point, and you just remember that stuff. So let me encourage those of you who are out there with input in leadership roles. You have a superpower to help organizations with recognition. And it doesn't always have to be a relator, and it doesn't always have to be individualization, and it doesn't have to be those. This input, which sometimes gets, Maika, we've heard the word hoarder pop up, right? When we think about that, right? This is that positive spin on it, and let me encourage you guys to do that. So, Maika.
I don't know what a hoarder means. Maybe it's that it becomes a problem, that what you're collecting becomes a problem, and the collecting becomes bigger than the utility. But I just think that golden nugget, Mike, that you've talked about is when you said you used to think input was about having answers, then you realize it's about having questions. I just feel like when it's true input, it's not just collecting in a way that it gets in your way. It's collecting because you can listen differently than other people can.
Micah, when you mentioned that, it made me think about something too that Jim kind of sparked, but. So that listening piece, which we all have, like I have activator number 6. So there's a lot about my strengths profile that causes me to want to do before I ask, or to act before I ask. And I think that's one of the values that I've been able to leverage out of input, is that a lot of times activator may just be a tad premature. And there's a wisdom about input that causes me to just pump the brakes a little bit and to make sure I'm accountable to, do we really have all the right information? And do we have, not in its raw expression, maybe input might say, hey, let's literally get all the information that exists out there around this thing that we need to do, which there's a diminishing return to that, right? Other strengths might come in and say, hey, let's assess the diminishing return. And maybe at the point that it starts to subside, let's just call it there and say we've got enough to make a decision. But I think in terms of the challenge of creating that question asking spirit or tone within a team, there's a mindfulness again about positioning people on my team. So everybody's got their subject matter expertise. First off, I want to know, what is that? What's their input, whether they think it's input or whether it actually is input technically or definitively. What's their expertise, input, contribution to making our team better? And are they known for that? And I think as we think about this audience, when we get into our team sessions, how do we elevate and position and orchestrate the perfect pedestals for each person on our team to have that moment where in front of our team or with our team, they display what they know. We ask them questions in response. We draw out the best value out of it. It's recognition for them, going back to Jim's point, but it creates this spirit now where we're all, hopefully, if we've done it well, that we're all curious about each other. We're all inquisitive about what each other knows, and we see the value in that. And it moves away from the preferential to where we now have this exchange of, hey, you tell me what you know, I'll tell you what I know, or what information do you have and where do you get it? Now here's the information I have and here's where I get it. And all of a sudden this zero-sum political environment gets shifted or transformed to where it's this abundance mentality. Look how much information we all possess. And if we all exchange that evenly, my goodness, we are incredibly powerful. And so then all of a sudden people start stepping into different roles and responsibilities, and maybe they were recognized for things that contributions that they didn't even know that they were making. And I think that's a part of input. But I think there's the thread of question asking and just the genuine objective, not subjective content or expression of question asking is a great team building expression that input can help create.
It sounds like you're using input to really flatten a hierarchy.
Yeah, exactly. I really, again, maybe this is just my own perspective on it. I feel like input is really pretty objective, and it's almost got a the value statement is that everybody matters because everybody possesses information or can contribute information. So we all qualify. Now it's just extending that invitation in a way that we all say yes, and we do so. So I don't think we have to get caught up in what somebody actually does know or how much they actually possess. It's just whatever you have, give it. Whatever you have, share it. And so it's got some long-reaching arms, I think, to bring everybody together that way. So. Yeah.
Has input ever in your time as a leader, it's a messy gig, has input ever hindered you or gotten in your way?
Yeah, it has. I think the traditional or the barrier that can catch a lot of input people, and as I was reflecting on this, there is definitely a boundary of, okay, Mike, you have completely capsized the boat with this tidal wave of information, and now they've got to climb back overboard. They've got to bail water. They've got to go through all this recovery because you've just completely overwhelmed. And so it's essentially that's where I had this boundary of like, okay, Mike, now you're being selfish and recreational. Now, to Jim's point, you just want to demonstrate that you have a lot of stuff, and that you can bring it out in a large show of force if you need to. And so I've really learned to ratchet that back down. And I think that's where I lean on that individualization, or I've leaned on the art of asking questions first. So then that guides me in terms of the release of how much information for that person. Yeah, is it too much? Is it not enough? And then even the style of delivery. So I've again, through our research, through some trial and error, have hopefully developed some defaults that manage that back down. But yeah, input by itself, if it was just to be let out of the box, it would want everything the world knows now, and then it would share it with you. So
that's great. We talked quite a bit about recognition and input, and I love that thread there. How do you like to be recognized, or what's the best way maybe to recognize or appreciate somebody with input?
Yeah, it's my friends know this well. I'm an easy play. It's just, they know who my authors are that I really lock in on, and they just feed me a steady diet of those types of books. And I am perfectly fine with that. I am the classic input person where I have, once you identify an author or a subject matter, then you just get everything associated with that. So I have all of Tom Peters' books. I have all of Malcolm Gladwell's books. I have, for me, all of the books that Gallup produces. That's just a fundamental citizenship statement that if you are associated with Gallup at all, and we are putting information like that out, then you must at the least possess it, and probably should have. If you were a good citizen, you would have actually at least skimmed through it to know what the lay of the land is. Not necessarily have read it from cover to cover, but you definitely know what it has as a potential for performance. So yeah.
I love that piece. And it leads me to thinking, if somebody was going to work for you or be on your team and have a great relationship with you, it sounds like that input would be that expectation that you at least make use of what I'm gathering for you. What's the secret sauce to being successful as a member of your team because of your input?
I think there just has to be there has at least to be a conscientiousness, and hopefully even an intelligence and an art form about how we assemble the information that we possess. So that's not just me pushing a big pile of information at you and then you have to pick and sort through it. But I think if we do it well, and if we're really smart about it, it's kind of going back to that Lego metaphor that I used earlier, where it's like, hey, look at this piece of information, and it's kind of cool by itself, but oh wow, it snaps on here, and now it's taking on, now it's a train, and now we can put wings on it, and it's a train that flies, and now it's, oh look, we can make a rocket booster, and now it's a train with a rocket booster and wings, and and oh, now we can cover up the place where the pilot's at, and now it can go under, and it's just constantly, but there is you can see now where I'm already dangerously close to being recreational and not necessarily stopping back and saying, okay, wait, we were probably functional enough with just making a train. Let's just stop at the train.
Recreational input might be my favorite new drug.
Mike, you and I have had several, I think in the last 6 months, we've probably had several experiences where we both have gone down, high ideation, high adaptability for me, high communication. So love to talk. I'll talk to you for like an hour.
Yeah.
And then we get to the end and we have to kind of pull back a little bit. Like, okay,
Right.
we just diagrammed the entire planet. Let's pull back a little bit, maybe work just on Omaha.
Yeah.
And, and so that is one of those things I think to be careful for as well, or to have that self-awareness around, is that, in some circumstances, and you love to get that input from me, and I will gladly tell you anything that you want to hear. And so we have this super fast, supercharged conduit in our relationship where that works out really well. That can kind of make us unproductive. I think there's been a few times where we spent an hour or two talking and we got to the end. We could have probably done that in 5 minutes,
Right.
Right. So I think that's one thing to watch for as a leader, to make sure that you're not allowing that to go on too much. I mean, we've had some great moments in there, but it is something I think we need to watch for when time is critical.
Yeah. I think going back to Jim, and I think the part that holds me accountable is if I do get too, I'll say, reckless or discretionary or recreational with that input, I think that does erode some of that level of, when we talk about trust or stability, I think people then are like, gosh, he's a little bit of a, is everything he's saying, does it have the thought and the care and the conscientiousness, or is all the information he's providing me with, can I trust it? If it is overwhelming, can I trust it? If it feels more like it's about what Mike likes to hear and discuss than it is about what I like to hear and discuss. And then I think that then plays itself out into trust, where it's like, well, I think what he's sharing is going to support me and position me well a lot of the times, but I have seen times where Mike has brought some information to me that wasn't aligned. And so, and again, that works against the wildest offense that input could have, is to not be useful. And so, so I do think that is eyes wide open. I want to make sure that I'm really sensitive to where that boundary is, because then you're just annoying. It's static. And again, that's as offensive to somebody who possesses input as any other.
Wow. I think you're really describing the dynamic presence of not just how input is useful, but how it builds something, how it honors other humans. Which kind of brings me to sort of my last question to wrap this up, Mike. What have you learned about input that if you were to beam yourself back to Mike on day one as a leader, what information would you bring with you that you wish you would have known before?
Yeah. I really do think it's about that, whatever other strength we have that gets us there is I think input, if from a leadership standpoint, if it's done well, like a lot of the other strengths, but the intentionality about actually getting as far out front with it as you possibly can. Whatever strength you possess that gets your input out front as far as it possibly can, is incredibly important, because that notion of hope that you touched on earlier, right, is the 4 needs of followers. When we think about the emotional impact of input, the confidence we can have because we possess so much knowledge and we've demonstrated that we know how to assemble and use that knowledge, gives us a great foundation that we can be hopeful from, but it also gives us an intelligence about how we can strategically be hopeful. So one of my favorite ways to describe hope is that it's the willpower. Do we have the enthusiasm and the emotional reserve, the inspiration, the confidence to say yes to something? But then the way power, do we have the smarts about it? Do we have the sophistication and the intelligence? And when we have the engine of that motivation and effort coupled with the intelligence and the strategy and sophistication, well, what shouldn't we be hopeful about? And now we literally can, as the person with input would collect the quote about the best way to predict the future is to create the future. Well, we can do that because we're armed with all of the content that we need to assemble what that future could look like. So I think I've learned just to really stay out in front with that input. And that way it gives people a lot of sifting and sorting opportunities to really receive the aspects of what I'm providing them in a way that it mines for the gold, right? So there's a lot of shiny iron ore in there, but eventually they get to kind of produce their own pan full of golden nuggets that are most useful and have the highest value content to them.
Phenomenal. Mike, I got to thank you. I think you've done one of the very best jobs so far this season of really describing the work that you've put into a talent. And there is a difference between that potential and performance when we think about the difference between a talent and a strength. And a lot of it comes from your intentionality around understanding what this is, around not just stopping at strengths identification, but at really thinking about how does this help you. And on top of that, so much of today's conversation, I feel like, has been on that focus on not just how does it help you, but how does this benefit others? How does this create a pathway that makes it possible for other people to do what they do best? And I can think of no better way to describe how I know you as a manager and a leader, other than that, of being the person who really pays attention to accessing, broadening, and building the potential that the folks on your team can live up to. So thanks for the thought that you put into this today, but also the thought that you put into it ahead of time as you're doing your input gathering. And thanks for continuing to be the type of leader that you are.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I do want to give you and Jim credit back again, because you have a statement that you're constantly referencing throughout all of your podcasts as we call the strengths to lead people. And I just simply love, like, how do you give this strength away? And you guys orient and hold us accountable, I think, to that statement. And I think that's an important one, particularly for input, to move past that recreational, what's in it for me kind of mindset into, like, truly, how does this actually benefit my team? Is it useful, or is it just my way of doing things? And I think the rest of the world should love it. So thank you guys.
You bet, Mike. Thanks for coming on, and I'll meet you for lunch here in a few minutes.
Yeah, that's
Well, you know what we'll do? We'll do a full debrief and download on what we talked about today. So it'll be a ton of fun. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center. Just gallupstrengthcenter.com. Send us your questions or comments. If you'd like to be a guest blogger, Maika mentioned this up front. Just send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, 400 to 600 words. Put guest blogger in the subject line, and we'll work with you. If we can use that, that'll make our coaches blog, which is on fire right now at the moment. You can also catch the recorded audio and video of this program, as well as all the past ones. Are available on links on our social page on our coaches blog. Go to coaching.gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, you can see a list of all the courses, anything we have new, as well as on our courses page. Just go to courses.gallup.com. And if you have any questions, send us an email. Again, coaching@gallup.com. If you found this helpful, please share it. And we'd love for you to share this around, by the way. We don't want to keep this in the coaching community. We'd love for you to share it out with your workplace or your friends or your Facebook friends, those kinds of things. Share that out. We'd love to have them see it. And we'll look forward to the next Theme Thursday. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.